Well, hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Serverless Office Hours. My name is Darko, and today there's no Julian here. There is no Eric. It is just myself, and I have a couple of guests today here to talk to me or to you about developing serverless applications with Kiro and a couple of MCP servers sprinkled across. I see AWS producer Jeff is in the chat. So, folks, we're live streaming on a couple of platforms. So if you want to drop your comments, your messages, or just tell me where you joining us from, the chat is right there. Now, today we're going to be talking about doing stuff, building serverless applications with AI and with the help of a couple of MCP servers. But I do want to kind of address this whole thing is that when I joined AWS 10 years ago now, serverless was a different beast, right? There were serverless elements to it. And when we talked about building the serverless applications itself, it was one of the biggest problems with serverless applications. Like, yeah, they're great. Yeah, they're flexible, scalable, scale to zero, whatnot. But they're so complicated. It's just so many efforts. There's a lot of effort to maintain and build the serverless infrastructure because there's so many different moving parts, and it can get a little bit confusing at best. I do think that we are currently in a place where we have these magical tools that are sitting on our computers, these tooling around them that can help us build serverless applications so much better. So if you are here to watch the serverless office hours and you, for some reason, have never built a serverless application, I think today, well, now is the best time to start. So hopefully today, as we talk to my guest a little bit, we're going to be able to kind of learn a couple of things, what Sean and Brian teach us, and maybe it gets you to build a serverless application with an MCP server and stuff like that. Eerie Edits is here. Hey, welcome. Daily Push, MCPs versus skills. Oh my God. Okay, Daily Push. I have a whole talk about MCPs versus skills, or actually a talk in the defense of MCP servers. I do think MCP servers have a very important part to play. Skills are great, don't get me wrong, and I don't think it's either or. I think the combination of these two things is what gets us through, because for some things, MCP servers just rule the roost. For other things, skills are way better or just sufficient without having to develop more MCP servers. So there's a little nuance, and I'm actually going to be asking my guests as well that question. So do stick around to potentially hear some more expert answers. And I see Eric is in chat. Hello, Eric. Yes, it is Darko on Serverless Office Hours. Here, absolutely. And Eric says, MCP, STDIO, or remote? I don't know. I'm a big fan of MCP servers, no matter the way you use them. There's a little bit of extra complexity when doing remote MCP servers, but I do think there's a good reason for you to use both of them. As I've frantically built a bunch of MCP servers for myself, and I ended up using a lot of them, and they just run in STDIO because I'm okay with that, and I don't want to have to rely on my client to handle the network traffic, right? I want my MCP server to handle the network traffic and authentication and whatever that means, but the coding assistant, whatever I choose, will be fine with that. So, see, Julian is here. Hey, Julian, we're missing you, of course. I hope one day I get to live stream this show with you all. So, Max Day Coding. Hey, folks, welcome to the show. Angel Strikes Back. Love the background. Yes, it's a real background. People keep asking me, is this a thing real behind me? It is my little nook here. Absolutely. Where's the Darko skill? The Darko skill it's just 2 lines of code. Just try to be funny and fail. Daily Push says, just learn skills could have Python code inside. Absolutely. The thing is, skills can have any code in them. The problem with skills and code is that you're still relying on the LLM to kind of determine that they need to run that specific code. Now, LLMs are pretty good at that, but still, it's non-deterministic. MCP servers are a little bit more deterministic in this case. And hello to Brazil, D. Sabib. Before we continue, I'm not sure. I want to ask chat, just kind of a little warm-up question. Does anybody know what, without Googling or asking your LLMs, what is dry stones? DHRYSTONES. Dry stones. It has to do with computing. It used to be used in computing for some reason. So if anybody in the chat knows what dry stones is, I I don't know. You should probably take some back medicine, pain medicine for your back, because we're getting old. I if you don't know, and don't Google, I will reveal at the end what dry stones are. It is more interesting than you think. So stick around. In around 20 minutes, I'll actually show you what dry stones are, and not just tell you what they are. Okay, without further ado, let me bring in my guests. I have Sean and Brian joining me right now to show you how to build serverless applications with some AI and MCP servers, and why not scales. Sean, Brian, welcome to the show. Welcome. Let's start with Sean. Sean, tell them what you are. Who are you? What do you do? And where do you join us from?
Yeah, for sure. So Sean Kendall, I am a principal solution architect at AWS. Specialize in a few different things, like the one that is on the top of my list, and the reason I'm here is serverless. Of course, I've been doing serverless at AWS for probably about like 5, maybe 6 years. I think I'm actually coming up to like maybe about 7 years at Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Where do you join us from? There's a little clue behind you, but
yeah, there is a little clue behind me. So I'm in Canada, Western Canada, Calgary, Alberta. There's our Calgary Tower right there, kind of hidden behind other buildings as they keep building taller and taller.
Shout out to Calgary. What's the hockey team from Calgary?
And we got the Calgary Flames, which
Flames. Okay.
Yeah, they were good in their days, but they've been struggling a little bit.
I don't know. Ever since moving to Seattle, I keep going to hockey matches, and I haven't seen us play Calgary, but I've seen us play something else. I forgot. Orcas or something. Yeah, but shout outs to Canada for sure. And Brian, the same questions for you. Tell us who you are, what do you do, and where do you join us from?
Yeah. Well, thanks. Good to be here. So yeah, my name is Brian. I've been here a few times, speak with with Eric and Julian on some other topics. But yeah, my background is development. I've been an engineer for many years. Like Sean, I've been doing serverless for a long time. I started I remember starting with Lambda and API Gateway when API Gateway came out. It's been that long. So kind of been with it since the beginning. Sean and I met in our internal serverless community at AWS. I've been here for 7 years. So after being a serverless specialist solutions architect, I moved over to my current team, which is called the Gen AI Innovation Center. And so what we do is we build free proof of concepts or MVPs for our customers all around generative AI. So it's pretty cool. So I've been doing this for about a little over a year now, maybe about almost a year and a half, focused on generative AI and building things with Gen AI. So it's been really fun. I'm actually in Seattle right now. You can't tell because of my background. My background's the hotel room, so I think a little bit uninspiring. But I live in Colorado. I live a little bit north of Denver. So going back to hockey, the Avalanche are actually doing pretty well right now, from what I hear.
The only thing I know about north of Denver is there's a Buc-ee's. I think it's the closest Buc-ee's to Seattle.
Yeah, I think Eric Johnson lives across the street from it.
There you go.
Yeah.
I was in Denver a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, I should go and visit a Buc-ee's. I've not seen a Buc-ee's yet, so it is one of those American pilgrimages I need to do. But excellent, folks. Okay, let's tell me a little bit. Whoever wants to start. What are we talking about here today? What is this thing about building serverless applications with MCP servers and AI?
Yeah, I'll kick us off. So for context, this is a talk that Sean and I did at reInvent last year. So that's roughly 6 months ago. And we did this as what's called as a code talk. So for the people who've never been to reInvent or don't know what that is, it's sort of like a breakout session in some ways where we're up on stage, but rather than driving the conversation with slides and lecturing to people and telling people about concepts and things like that, we are literally live coding. So Sean and I both had our laptops up, and we came up with a challenge to actually demonstrate how this works. Right, we're teaching the audience through live coding, and the scenario that we came up with was we have a front end application for tic-tac-toe, and what it takes is a URL. It can be anything, but of course ours is going to have a serverless backend behind it, and that URL needs to abide by an open API contract. And so what we did, and Sean did it on his laptop, I did it on mine. We're going to do the same thing here. but we both built a serverless backend to implement this open API spec, plugged it into the UI, and then played tic-tac-toe with a robot behind the scenes.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to do here. That's the context. And again, we're going to use this scenario to drive the conversation to figure out, all right, like, you can do this many different ways. You could do this using different AI tools. You could do it with or without MCP servers, different IDEs. And so we're just going to use this as, again, like a way to talk through how a few ways to do it.
Okay. Let's see. I mean, so we're not talking about building MCP servers per se. We're talking about building serverless applications together with MCP servers, or okay, that's fair.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, because we have a question here from Daily Push is asking like, when considering MCP serverless on MCP on serverless, does the warm-up time seems to matter? I will say no, not necessarily here, because you're dealing with latencies that are more on the LLM side than the serverless side. So even if you have some additional latency, it wouldn't really matter, I'll be honest. So kick it off, my friends. Let's see.
Yeah. One thing I did want to make note of here is that before this, Sean and I were talking about this, and again, it's been 6 months since we did this the first time. And one thing that we both said to each other kind of at the same time was like, things are moving so fast and the models are getting so good. This might be a little bit of a different talk because before we showed like, hey, extending the abilities of these models with MCP servers. There was a market difference 6 months ago, and now I think we've both seen that these models are getting so good they can do a lot more or perform a lot more challenging tasks without extra help. And so tic-tac-toe, frankly, is fairly simple. So we're thinking about doing this in the future with something more complicated like chess, or I don't know if we need to do like Go or some other complicated game. But for now, like we're gonna see how this goes, and we might solve it really quickly. Don't really know. But Sean, how do you want to do this? Do you want me to? Should I start with Kiro, or do you want to show like how you set things up? Because what we do here for the audience is that I show the Kiro IDE, and what Sean did at reInvent, and I assume we're going to do it again here, is show the CLI. So we can start with that.
Yeah. Well, so how about this? Like I'll show what I do in the CLI. I'll get mine building, right, and then we can shift over to the IDE piece of it. And the first thing I'll actually do as well is show you kind of what it looks like. So if you want to view my screen there,
you can see it. Yep.
Okay, you can see it. All right. So this is basically what the front end looks like. It's really boring right now. It is basically the tic-tac-toe game. You're going to eventually see a board here. We have a little bit of a debug panel. Now I'm actually going to use this URL that you see here to guide my agent to build the backend for this tic-tac-toe game. And then also what we put in here is this open API spec, because that's just additional guidance. So if I open that, you'll see that it is a full API spec, so that Kiro has a little bit more guidance on what the front end is expecting, which is kind of the only requirement here. So what I'll do first is I'm going to switch over to my terminal, because this is kind of what I prefer to do. Now I'm going to start off by creating a new directory. So I'm going to create one called TTT, tic-tac-toe. I'll go into that. And then when you're using Kiro on the IDE, basically it's a simple command, Kiro CLI, so Kiro-CLI chat. Now I use a -a flag, which I always got to give people a warning about this. If you're using the -a flag, it's basically
Sean, can I ask you to zoom in uncomfortably into this, because we can't see anything. Okay.
Is that getting better? Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
perfect. So yeah, the command was this Kiro CLI chat -a. So that -a flag, it's a little dangerous. It basically means don't ask me for any permissions. Just go crazy, right? Go do whatever you want.
Sure.
And of course, everything I do is fake. Nothing's going to production. So if it blows away something I've been working on, I really don't care. But I gotta just put that warning out there that it is something that could be dangerous, right? It's just gonna go. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna choose a model, right? So I'm gonna stick this to the let's do a Sonnet 4.6 model. It goes a little bit faster. It's a little bit cheaper. Has a nice 1 million context window. And then what I'm really gonna do is just tell it how to get started. So you are going to build a serverless backend for a tic-tac-toe game hosted at
Okay.
I'll say that's where.
As Sean is typing this out,
Yeah.
once he finishes this, we're gonna just sit here and watch it code, and that's the future of live streaming, my friends. We just let an LLM do a thing, and we hope for the best. Okay, so you are telling it to build a serverless backend for a tic-tac-toe game, hosted on this specific link. That's the front end. Okay, so excellent. And there's an API spec located there. Interesting. And again, is it going to be wiring in the front end to the back end, or?
So what it's gonna do here. So I'm gonna say make sure you deploy this to my default AWS account. When it's done, provide to me the URL I can pass.
Yeah.
Too many S's.
Make sure to tell it to make no mistakes, please.
Yeah, make no mistakes. There you go. Let's see what that does. And so I'm basically just going to execute this. You can see here, I got this text here. It says master. What I've done, and I can show you this once we get something built, but I've created a master agent that's an orchestrator. And what that does is it calls a whole bunch of sub agents. And I can show you all my sub agents. Those sub agents actually use skills and they use MCP servers. And so one thing Brian was referring to before was, we find you don't really need a lot of MCP servers now. This does still require some. So it requires something like a fetch MCP server. And what that's able to do is it's able to, pull open, let's say, this open API spec, and the front end, it can go and inspect that. So it does require something to be able to get that data.
Sure. Sure.
And then the other thing in here, I'm using skills to basically tell it like the best practices I want within serverless, right? And so going into there, it's going to tell it to use things like power tools, right? Power tools are really good framework or tool you can use when building serverless apps. It also guides it to always build in CDK. So you're going to notice it's always building in CDK here because the skills behind the scene, that's what it's telling it to do.
And I'm going to assume you have a little bit of a configured rules and skills for this agent, so it knows to do exactly the same thing. This is not just your vanilla sonnet in the way it works with things. Okay, that's good.
Exactly, yeah. So I do have guys telling it to, stick to CDK. Make sure you're using CDK NIG, right? Which is another really good thing to include to make sure it's kind of following AWS best practices and whatnot.
Understood. Okay, cool. Come here from the Daily Push. Do you find MCPs in ChatGPT versus Claude differ? I think there's a lot of, so the biggest thing with MCP server support, I think both LLMs are very good. Both LLM providers are very good at using MCP servers. It's usually the harness that is the kind of the thing where this happens. So sometimes depending on what harnesses that LLM to do your bidding, be that a coding assistant or be that Hermes, as I see you mentioned here, that may cause things to differ. But I have not done any sort of specific benchmarking on the two models, and I do use both models for various things. So, okay, Max Day saying, can you share the skills you wrote? Is that a public thing you're willing to share, Sean?
I am actually working on a GitHub repository right now that has all my skills included onto it. I'll be releasing that probably in the next couple of weeks here. Just got to make sure it's nice and clean and kind of, it's something good to share. So some good news on that. I have shared it with a few people so far that have easily, actually, they've used Kiro within their agent directory just to pull that and then create their own agents. And it's actually worked really well. And actually, just like while this is building, before we switch over to Brian here, I will show you the way I build my agents. I'll just go to a different tab here, is I actually go into, here, let's blow this one up again. So I actually go into my Kiro directory and I will open Kiro within here. Now you're going to see here I'm using a -r flag. That means resume my previous conversation. What I do here is I actually come in and I use Kiro to make Kiro better, right? So I'll tell it to create agents, create sub agents, create new skills. I'll even point it to different AWS pages. So like here we have the newly released agent toolkit for AWS. It actually just when we released this, I think it was the day we released this, I went back into Kiro and I told it to basically rebuild my entire configuration using the agent toolkit for AWS, which kind of moves to a more prescribed way of coding and away from some of the MCP servers we were releasing within the AWS Labs repository. I'll also point it over to, so like this document here is the Kiro.dev website where you can download Kiro. And on here, I've actually told it, come here and read how do you do this kind of stuff. So it'll load these pages, it'll figure out what the configuration should look like. There's some good examples on here. And that's how I built my agents. So shifting back here, I can literally tell it, I'll say, build me a new agent that can upgrade libs in any project. Right, so I can simply do that, and it now understands how to build an agent, and it'll go and do it, and it'll allow me to use that.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating thing, especially when you start expanding. And this is where you get into a lot more complex stuff. We have this like an array of agents and have something orchestrated. I will advise the people here just to, from time to time, check in on your agents and check in the way they're written, because you can get something. You can get a bunch of degradation if you have it kind of creating itself on itself constantly. So you want to make sure that at least your top level instructions that you give it are your words and they sound like you and they come from your best practices and whatnot. Otherwise, you're going to have just kind of like a slowly degrading quality of agents. But I think that's a really good way, pointing it at the web page, making a bespoke agent for something. Yeah, that's really good. I like it.
Yeah, I have noticed another thing that if I keep resuming the conversation, so over on this Kiro agent side, if I continuously resume the conversation and build new agents,
yeah.
Sometimes I kind of lose some quality. So if I restart it without the history, and I tell it to go in and assess all the agents, it might find something different. So that's another thing I like to do every once in a while.
I will actually encourage folks out there, when you have multiple agents being built by a single LLM. So in this case, Kiro supports Claude. Open up a different LLM. Use OpenCode. Shout outs to OpenCode, and have it use ChatGPT or GPT model or Kimi models, and point them at those agents and tell them to review them. Just it kind of gives you a little bit more of a critical take on it. So I think it's always good. Otherwise, you get this whole single set of mind from a single LLM provider. So and again, you don't have to do it all the time. Once in a while, it's a little bit of a checkup on these things because stuff changes online. Okay, so we see one agent being orchestrated here. So basically, you told it to did you tell it to build a serverless application? I forgot your prompt. Or you just told it to build a. Okay, yeah. So you made it obvious that it's serverless. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So I actually told it a serverless backend, and that way I actually do have some steering documents that also, when I specify serverless, there's a very specific way to build serverless and specific services I wanted to use, specific patterns. So that is something. In fact, if I open up I will open up the Kiro IDE here. This is what it looks like. Very similar to VS Code. It's basically VS Code with a whole bunch of nice Kiro stuff inside of it. And so here you'll see. So I'll show you this is my master agent, right? It's basically the orchestrator. There's a very long prompt in here that really tells it how to orchestrate. Here, and I'll open that for you as well. So in here, there's a long prompt, and it does say, yeah, if you're using serverless, you're going to delegate to the serverless sub-agent, right? So I have all these sub-agents in here. I've even gone as far as doing, front end for all my React apps. I like to build a lot of React apps. And then even if you come down here, one of my customers I'm working with right now, they are doing a bunch of SAP ABAP development. So I've created for them an SAP ABAP sub-agent that knows really well how to write ABAP code and even make sure that it's correct ABAP code. And then if I shift over to my, my serverless. So here's basically the serverless guidance I'm giving it, right? So when it starts using Lambda, it's going to start using Python 3.14, which is, I believe, still the current latest version of Python you can use on there. Make sure it uses power tools. So there's all this guidance here. Even CDK name. So these are things I like it to do every single time. And this has gotten me to a point where most of the time I can actually just give it a one-liner, and it fully builds my apps. Now, my apps usually also include a front end, but that just takes a bit longer. So here, of course, we have the front end already deployed and working.
Excellent. And now you meant, is this invoking any sort of tools or MCP servers? We haven't discussed that yet, but is that happening here in the backend, or this is just purely kind of I've seen an AWS call, but AWS should be natively baked into the Kiro, if I recall.
Yeah, so there is a whole bunch of MCP servers that it's able to use. So if you look at the master agent, for example, I have a web search. Now, this one probably doesn't need to use web search.
Sure.
Context 7, which has a lot of good coding examples. GitHub, so I can now when I'm done this, I can tell it to go push it to my GitHub repository. This I'll skip over here. This AWS MCP server is a really good one to look at the latest documentation on AWS. So that's a really good one to have in there. And then even I think a lot of these I also just have in my serverless one as well, right? So Context 7 and AWS MCP server. One thing to know about how the CLI works a little bit different from the IDE is you have these sub-agents, and the sub-agents themselves, when it delegates, it actually has a whole new context, right? So it doesn't carry that massive context forward. And that way you can save a little bit of money on those tokens and credits. I just thought it's telling me it finished something here. Oh, I guess that's on the agent creation side. When you are inside of the CLI, you can also do a Control G, and you can watch it do its work. So here I can actually see it, kind of whatever it's trying to do. So here it's writing a little bit of CDK, and then it looks like it's almost at the deploy stage here. And so another part of this guidance, and when I share my steering docs in the future in the next couple of weeks, I do have some guidance in there. So when it's done, it is going to summarize all of the MCP servers, sub-agents, and tools that it used to do this. Now, in this one, I suspect it's probably really only using fetch, and it might be using some of the AWS MCP servers as well, because probably finds that helpful. But the fetch one is going to be the biggest one here.
And is there something specific for serverless or CDK in this case, or like is it just using the database docs one?
Well, so we used to actually have one. It's probably still on there on AWS Labs, specific to AWS or the serverless. Now the serverless one is kind of routed under that AWS. There is an infrastructure as code one that I have configured as well. So the infrastructure as code gives it the guidance on how to build within CDK. So that one is included in here as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Did we want to shift over to Brian? And Brian, maybe you can show how we do it on the IDE.
Yeah.
And then when mine's done, we can shift back here and see all the magic and what it did.
Perfect. Yeah, we can pull up my screen. So this is Kiro for people who haven't, I mean, you saw a little bit from Sean, but this is Kiro. One of the things I love about just where we are with all of these tools today is that Brian's opinion here is there's no wrong answer. We're all figuring things out, and people have different, it's just like before Gen AI, like people had different development setups depending on how their brains work. And I think it's the same thing here. So there are all these principles, and different tools, and arrange them in a way that works for you. So I mean, I'll say it also. I've been doing things like I've been working with Claude Code, with Open Code. I've tried all Kiro on the command line, all the different things. So Sean showed you one way. I'm going to show you another way with Kiro. So this is what Kiro looks like. Over here on the left, if you click the little ghost icon, now you can see the MCP servers. In our first talk that we did at reInvent, this is where we came in and we just clicked the button and it showed people, hey, here's how you go and add a new MCP server. I was going to do it here, but I think it'd be more interesting to start talking about powers, because that's something I have had conversations or taken questions from customers, and they say, well, what's different with between Kiro and Claude Code, or Kiro and fill in the blank? And one thing is this notion of powers. And there was a question around, well, should you have a skill or an MCP? And skill powers are sort of smash those together. So I'm just going to go through and it's best to look at an example.
Right.
So we have available powers, and I'm going to go down, and there's one here for AWS SAM. I've bootstrapped an application which is an AWS SAM application, which literally does nothing. It's just like a hello world. Really, really, really simple. Now let's see if it takes me. Yeah, here we go. So AWS SAM. So if I click on that, you can click GitHub repository and go look at that. A power is made up of a couple things. The big thing, you can think about it like it's almost like a skill, but it comes with additional and optional MCP servers. So there is a prompt in here that the AWS SAM power comes with, and then it also comes with some MCP configuration. And so I'm going to click install on this one, and this will take a little bit very quickly. And so now I have it installed. And so now I'm going to hide this and click on try power, and we'll see what happens here.
I think to your point, I think powers are such a great thing because they do bridge that skills versus MCP's gap, because it basically packages up a skill with an MCP server most of the time. And I think it's just a great way to do it. I wish powers were supported in the Kiro CLI, because it's not, unfortunately. But I think for the IDE users, I think it's just a fantastic way to get those things bundled up together.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I almost see it similar to how Sean did this all manually. Of course, it gives you more control.
Right.
This is a nice way to just get started quickly, right? You fire up Kiro, start activating a few powers, use them, and see how it works. The other neat thing in here is, just like Sean had a tool to go and create new skills, Kiro has a power to create your own powers. So if you're working on a particular application, you can create a power for that automatically through the create a power. It's very meta and circular. But you can
everything here is circular. That's fascinating.
Right. But so now it's doing things, right? So it said like, hey, I just activated this. Does this work? So now it's checking out and make sure that I have Docker installed. Is SAM even installed? So it's really just bootstrapping me. So again, if you're a brand new user, you haven't done, in this case, SAM before, it's going to get you up and running, fairly quickly. Yeah. So here I have all this ready to go. So this should go fairly quickly. Once this is done, then I'll go and I'll kick off my prompt to build the tic-tac-toe backend.
Good. So just kind of answer a couple of questions here from Data Push. It says, is power specific to Kiro? It is specific to Kiro. So these are things specific to Kiro, but only specific to the Kiro IDE version. So if you have Kiro IDE, which, to your point, it's VS Code. Well, it's not VS Code. Legally, it is the open source version of code. So and it's just a fork of that. It looks and feels and everything like VS Code, but it is Kiro. It has a bunch of Kiro features built into it. So definitely do suggest you check it out. There's a free tier. You can go and have fun with it. And powers are part of that. And you will see a growing list of powers where people are building these powers available to Kiro. So, and you can also build your own powers, which is just amazing. I don't think you can directly use it in Claude, but again, ultimately, a power is just an easy way to plug in an MCP server plus a bunch of skill files. That's it. So you could technically make that work in Claude as well, but I don't know if Claude or Codex has like their own version of this. So yeah, it's fascinating how like we're in a world where stuff is just kind of like happening and evolving in front of our eyes in an incredibly rapid fashion. And powers are this new thing. They keep growing. Some other things keep popping in. So I'm just happy that people agree on certain standards on things. So before we continue, I promised chat something. Chat, I asked you what dry stones are. And nobody answered, which is good. I guess nobody Googled. You could Google what dry stones are. Dry stones are. Jeff, can you put my video on top so I can show people on a screen here?
And while you do that, Darko, yes. I'm going to prompt this thing. I'm going to kick this off on the back end. So you come back. Hopefully, we'll have something to look at.
And we're going to look at your prompt. So dry stones. Jeff, can you make me just the full screen while I do that? It's there you go. Thank you. So dry stones are. Measure performance. Exactly, Daryl. That is correct. Whetstones was a measure of computer performance. So in 1984, somebody came up with dry stones. This is a benchmark performance tool for the IBM PC from 1984. And it shows the performance in dry stones. So this IBM PC that has an Intel 8086 has 344 dry stones. It's obsolete. It's not used anymore by any means. But there we go. Fun fact of the day. Jeff, you can put us back all together. So there we go. Brian is doing his prompt. Hopefully, there we go. There's a prompt coming in. I need a SAM application to implement a tic-tac-toe backend that abides by this spec. So it's a very similar prompt to the one Sean did. So this is a prompt off, I guess, to see whose setup does better. And I think to your point, it depends, and we're all dealing with non-deterministic systems here, so it may be just a roll of the dice.
Yep. And sometimes I like to just as a test, just be very sparse and see what happens, right? I mean, if I was doing this for real and this was going to be a production system, I'd spend much more time crafting a good spec or a prompt. But in this case, let's just throw it like, and again, in some ways, this is a test of how does this power do with Opus. You can see down at the bottom right, I've selected Opus 4.7. So with a very generic spec and these tools, let's see if we can get it right.
I guess this is also the bake-off between Opus and Sonnet, because I stuck
that is true as well.
At the Sonnet, and I did notice you put something in there that might make yours win on working for the first time, and that's the cores comment, because I do find if you don't tell it to handle cores, for some reason it just doesn't do it. So
we'll weird how cores is never handled properly. Like
right.
It feels like one of those things, or cross origin request system, whatever, cores, CORS, is one of those things that keep fumbling people up with serverless applications, for me as well. So
and on that topic, I'm going to switch over real quick if we can. I'm going to change my share and move over. I think it'd be interesting to look at the prompt for the SAM power shares. Let me just change this to here. Here we go. So like I said, going back a couple minutes, we talked about how a Kiro power is a steering file, or kind of like a document that explains what a prompt essentially, and a collection of MCP servers, which are optional. Yeah. But this is the actual prompt that the power uses. And one thing in here, if I look for cores, it actually is called out specifically. So, and I see in the commit history, this was Kim Wentz, who's one of our amazing solutions architects. We talked in the past together. So she put this in here. So she has a section on core. So I did prompt it and gave it a clue. Said, okay, make sure you take care of this. I didn't tell it how to handle cores. So hopefully here it'll get it right. But yeah, these are really interesting to go and browse through. And if every power, you can go and look at hopefully the GitHub repository and see like what is actually in there. And again, use that as a guide to create your own powers.
I think that's creating your own powers and your skills is always a very, very important thing to do with coding assistants these days, because not only do you improve your work going forward, you also get to let's say offload certain memory you need to keep in your head to a skill file or a rule file or whatever you want to call it. So I think this is a really cool. I do encourage people that when you are creating skills or having an LLM create skills for something you're not really aware of, I do encourage you to look at them, like we're looking at this one right now, so you at least know what the thing is, and you don't want to be surprised by certain things. I know we have less and less need to actually look at the code, but as an old fart here and a person who enjoys technology, just try to at least be aware of what's going on. So excellent. Look at this big old power. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good stuff in here.
So what can we get the status update? What's going on with Sean's build out and what's happening with Brian's? Not sure which one we're ready to show.
Well, I'm guessing Brian's is just getting started. If you want to switch over to mine, I have my terminal up here.
Okay, we see it. Yep.
And so what you'll see here is it has completed the solution. It did it within CDK. Now, if I scroll through this, there's thousands and thousands of lines of output here. It even has given me now this the endpoint that it has deployed that should technically work with our front end. However, it's also doing testing, right? Within a lot of my steering docs, I do tell it to do a lot of testing, and it's finding that there's issues in the code, right? Things are failing. And so it's coming through here and it's actually telling me, it's like, oh no, I found all these different errors. I'm gonna fix them. So it's doing fixes, and then it comes back in and it's running a CDK deploy command. Now, the other thing you're gonna notice here is I actually have, so it shows you a list of tasks here. It says 2 done, 3 remaining. This is because I'm actually using the spec-driven development files that you get out of the box with the Kiro IDE.
Okay.
So spec-driven development, for those of you who don't know, there's like vibe coding, which is very similar to what you've seen I've done here today. Then there's spec-driven, and spec-driven gives you very specific files to lay out things like the business requirements, the technical requirements, and then a list of tasks. In fact, I can also here. I'm going to show you what this looks like in the Kiro IDE. Let me just open it here, because you'll see it's actually compatible with the IDE as well. Or at least it should be. So if I come in here, let's see, I'll blow this up a little bit. And if I open this .kiro directory, you'll see there's a design, There's a requirements. Let me close the side panel. So design, it kind of gives me a nice design of what it's going to be doing here. Requirements, and so a list of requirements. And then once that's figured out, it then moves over to tasks. And so you'll see here with tasks is that it's actually, the CLI is stepping through these tasks. And when it's completely done, there'll be check marks here on everything. Now, one thing I've noticed is when you're using the CLI versus the IDE, the CLI has probably finished a lot of these tasks already. It just keeps it within its memory, so it hasn't persisted the file yet. But when it's completely done, these tasks will all be checked here. And so going back, you'll see that there are, wait, it's done. Well, there was, I think, like 2 tasks available. So now that it's done, let's find that endpoint. So here's the endpoint. So I'm going to copy it. I'm going to shift over to my tic-tac-toe game. I'm going to configure it, and let's see if it works. Register player. It seems to be working. I'll start a new game. Let's see if I can play. Oh, it's smart enough.
Okay.
Uh-oh. So looks like we've had some type of an issue, which is fine, right? So now what I'll do is I'll switch back to my terminal, and I'll simply I'll talk to it like a real human. I'll say I've been testing this, and I notice after a few moves, it stalls. Please look at my CloudWatch logs and see if you can fix this issue. You'll notice I also say please quite a bit, and that way, if the AI ever takes over, it knows that I'm one of the good ones.
Right, of course, always please. Yeah, somebody mentioned that in the chat as well. Somebody so Ken Walsh in the chat says, does model, e.g. Sonnet, know how to create the API gateways with cores? So the thing is with LLMs is that maybe, right, it's probably inside of their skill set and their knowledge corpus, but a lot of times they just don't, weirdly enough. Like, it's kind of like they don't necessarily handle cores well, and I don't know why. It's a course is confusing for everybody, I guess, LLMs included.
And I remember when we did this at reInvent, I forget what models we were using, Sean. Maybe it was I don't know. I don't know if we were using Haiku or like it wasn't Sonnet 4.6. It was something.
I think we're like 3.5, maybe 3.7.
Yeah, I'm misremembering the numbers, but I know it was. It almost seems like a generation ago, 6 months ago. But it felt like every single time we would do this, it would trip up on cores every single time. And so when we were doing this in our live, because of course we practiced, when we were up there on stage, we made sure to make a note of, hey, don't forget cores. Once it was guided, the model did fairly well at getting it. And we did, I think we did up there on stage, we did get it correct where it worked. So mine's running right now also. One thing I have noticed with the new Opus 4.7 model, and this goes across tools, but there's a much deeper thinking process with Opus 4.7. So I gave it my prompt to go, and it spun for probably a good at least 3 to 4 minutes of just thinking, and then said, all right, now I think I know what I need to do. I'm going to go and run through these things right now. So right now it's creating code, implementing the game logic, deleting files locally. So it's off to the races.
I do want to encourage folks out there who are using Kiro. Kiro just recently released a feature when it comes to spec-driven development. So we touched upon spec-driven development in a little bit here, but there's a new feature that came out to spec-driven development called requirements analysis. So in a nutshell, when you do spec-driven development, Kiro creates a requirements doc, a design doc, and a task doc. A requirements doc is your typical EARS notation, EARS, right? You've seen it here. It's your, as a user, as an admin, I want X, Y, and Z, right? It's kind of these like requirements doc that you would get or receive from a product team or create during the initial discussion of software development. What can happen with requirements doc is that it can be a big source of bugs. Now, I'm not saying just broken code. I'm meaning literally the way the program works. They're usually fine, but there could be some inconsistencies, some ambiguity, some even conflicts between different requirement lines. So requirements analysis is an additional feature into Kiro that basically you can tell Kiro just analyze my requirements docs deeply. And it doesn't just analyze it with just telling an LLM analyze it, please. No, it does something. It uses something called neurosymbolic AI. Neurosymbolic AI is when you combine both neural networks or your LLMs and automated reasoning. So a little bit more of the what's the word? Brain fart. A little bit more of the deterministic element to it, and it uses those two things to determine if things are actually correct. So it can get you a longer way there into actually achieving your own goal. So for sure. Okay, stuff is happening now. This thing is actually deploying stuff to your AWS account, right?
It is, yeah, and that's because I told it. I basically said I trust you to deploy. Don't ask me to deploy. Use my default configured AWS account. So I do have, like the AWS command line. It is installed on my machine. I have it configured with an account, and that way it doesn't ask me. And I find if you don't tell it that it has explicit permission to deploy, it'll usually just come back with a command. It'll say, well, you go run this.
Yeah.
I don't want that, right? I want it to just do it for me. And again, when I talk to customers, I actually tell them not to do that because I'm like, but you guys actually have real stuff going on. Maybe you better execute that command or at least review what it's doing before you allow it to go and do that.
Yeah. Okay.
And so here, yeah, it is. It looks like it fixed. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to see what it did here. So let's just refresh the page. And in fact, I think I'm just going to deconfigure it, reconfigure it here. We'll register the player, new game. It may have not fixed it.
Look at that.
Right? This is why it's good to test. Now, I actually do also have a testing steering dock in there, and if I got it to use it, it'll go in and test everything itself as well. Now, I did not tell it. Did not tell it to do that this time.
And also, this also could be a front end bug. It's been 6 months since we tried this. I very well could have pushed something a while ago that I had forgotten about. I think with all this, we have a lot of code that is probably, if not 100% working, very, very close to working. And that was all hands off.
Yeah, there was something in here because I was reading through all these steps here, and it did actually say it found a bug up here. It said it might be a UI bug.
Oh.
And that's why it's nice to read some of the output and kind of see what's actually going on. Now it found the UI bug, and then it said, well, I found a way that we can. This stuff is scrolling so fast. It found a way that it can basically fix it. But see, here's where it found the error. There we go. This is wait. It's actually the UI's problem, not the back end. And then it goes on. It creates a fix anyways. And now that I've kind of taken that error and I put it back in here, it's going to go and it's going to try to fix it, and then it's going to deploy. And this is basically how I work most of the time, right? Mm-hmm. I make something, I test it. If I find an issue with it, I tell it back to the AI. Now I usually tell it to go and test it itself, and I'll use frameworks such as Playwright or Cypress. And where it can actually even start up my own browser, and it'll go and test things with the real UI so it can find it itself. And that saves me a lot of time. That's one of those things that I'll do overnight, right before I go to bed. I'll literally kick it off and I'll say, just go figure it out. And I'll wake up in the morning and usually it's working.
Good. I do. There's a couple of comments here mentioning why not ask Kiro from Ken Walsh. Why not ask Kiro to create a deployment script based on your CloudFormation template? So I think deployment scripts are great. One of the things I love to use with my my projects is that, and this is an advice for all of you, use make files or use just files or use task files, some way to abstract certain operational elements of your application. So for example, I tell Kiro to create a just file. If you haven't checked out what just files are, check out what just files are. Create a just file that runs, deploys, tests, does certain things on your application. And that way Kiro doesn't have to reinvent its own command that's going to run to deploy and do a bunch of stuff. It's a really good way to organize your application in an easy way. And then if you want to test your application, you can just run just test or just dev, whatever. It is a really good way to streamline a little bit of that. So people are asking.
Take some of that advice. I was just going to say, just to also answer that question, it actually does create. So this is
There
through
you
my
go.
steering docs. It creates a deploy.sh. Now I also noticed, I wasn't going to say anything. I noticed that it created the file and it's not using the deploy.sh. So that's just more guidance. Now I might have to go back to my steering docs and tell it, you're going to create the deploy.sh, but make sure you always use it for deployments
Right.
going forward.
I mean, you did say to make no mistakes. So you did put make no mistakes. So Brian didn't. So I wonder how Brian's gonna work out. But no, I think this is always a thing where you can tell an LLM to do something or create something, it just may not do it, especially after a long context run. So it's non-deterministic. But I will say that I have a rule file that tells my coding agents to always generate a just file based on a specific template I like to use, and then use that for all of these things. So definitely a good way to automate or create a little bit more of an optimized operational element to this. Jonathan is asking, can you share how many credits have you spent in this project so far? I don't know if Kiro CLI shows you that directly here. I know Kiro IDE does show you how many credits were used for a thing, but
yeah, I mean, let's see if I don't know if it shows me in the actual.
There is 15. There it is. In the previous one, you've seen 15 credits used.
Well, yeah. So that's where was that? You saw that
in one of the things you scrolled up. There was a 15.52 credits being used somewhere.
There we go.
15.52, right? But this is just for this one. So.
And I know you can. I mean, this might. We'll see if this will scare anyone or not. I don't know how much I've used this month. Oh, actually, that's not that bad.
That's not bad.
I have 2 Kiro accounts I use, and this one, yeah, I'm actually not doing that bad. And I think I'm well over 100% on my other one. But
you're not token maxing here, my friend Sean. But good. Yeah, I mean, to chat, you should not try to token max unless you just burn money. But you should also optimize which models you want to use for what, right? Sometimes using a smaller model like Sonnet or even Haiku for certain things is just better, right? You don't have to go and burn Opus for everything. We tend to just kind of like, I'm just going to use Opus 4.7 for everything, hopefully. I actually, when I do a lot of my home automation stuff, and I have a bunch of home automation, I use a different harness that uses Kimi, and it's fine. It's way cheaper, and it's fine for a lot of things. So don't be shy to use a smaller model when needed. Yeah,
I know a lot of the... Well, just on that point, like a lot of the guidance I give to customers that actually use this and don't have unlimited tokens like myself is go use Auto, right? Auto will actually route it to the best model fit for purpose. And there's lots of models in there, right? So we have all the quad models, but then you have like DeepSeek, Minimax, GLM, Quent. So there's a lot of models for it to choose from.
I'm still waiting for the team to release Kimi's K.2.6. Huge fan of that model, but I'm still waiting for it to be available on Kiro. So, yeah. So a couple of questions here. Ken Walsh, just file, is it a Python? It's not Python. It's literally just shell scripts, but it's nicely formatted. It's a better version of Makefiles. So if you've used Makefiles in the past, just files are going to make your life better. So token maxing, yeah, I know there's some companies that are encouraging that. Sure, if a company's paying for it, fine. Well, actually, not fine. Don't do that. It's just stop it. Also learn how to manage your token economics. I have, again, different agents who do perform different tasks. I assign them different models. It just makes it easier. So excellent. Perfect. So is this working? Are we...
It's hitting the same issue. So okay. I'm not having a lot of confidence in this right now. But Brian,
yeah, let's see Brian. Yeah. It didn't listen to you.
Yeah, we can go over to mine. So here. So this is, let's just go over to the end result. Going back to tokens. This one took 9 tokens. It take a little bit longer than expected. I think maybe Opus is under high demand right now. But anyway, yeah, it finished. One interesting thing in here is that you can see, and this wasn't me prompting it, but it started going through this testing process just using curl.
Okay.
Right, and so it was testing cores, right? You can see it sending the options header. It actually did walk through I think an entire game as well. So it's saying like, hey, register player, sending moves, going back and forth and things like that, testing out an invalid player name. And so you can see here it says, okay, everything works. Unregistered player works, cores, pre-flight headers work, duplicate game name, things like that. And so it gave me the base URL. So I'll switch over to that and we will test it. It was funny because while Sean was going, I tested it and it was failing, and ends up it was a copy paste error on my behalf from me. So, you know, the ultimate non-deterministic thing, which is humans. So let me change my screen share and window, and let's go over to my tab. Okay. So I'll close that down. Okay, I'm going to refresh this because those errors were. So yeah, here. And also, by the way, anyone else can try this. The URL is just ttt.brianz.xyz. It's literally just a front-end application that does nothing. So there's no code here. There's no authentication. There's no nothing. All it does is it makes requests to whatever you plug in here in the URL. So I'm going to click on Register Player. So that seems to have worked. And I did not test this before, so this is new. So I'll hit New Game.
Okay.
Oh, I got an error here. And this is, I saw this earlier when I was testing this morning. So we'll see if it still works. So I'm going to go to the center.
Okay.
That worked. Let's go there, there. Okay. So that works.
There you go.
It's drawn.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that. Apparently using a better model helps. And it didn't care about the make no mistakes comment. I am appalled. Excellent. So the URL is going to be ttt.brianz.xyz. I'm going to ask Jeffrey. Jeffrey, you can pop it in the chat, please. I can't do it from here. But ttt.brianz.xyz.
Yeah, and I think there is a front end bug here. You can see that I'm hitting that this stalling, this processing spinner thing here. So player already has an active game. So there might be a bug here somewhere that either Sean's code and my code are implementing the same bug, or maybe it's a front end bug. Don't really know.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of the whole thing. We're building things here in real time with agents, and we're just kind of hoping for the best. Ever since the dawn of generative AI, it has made my life so much harder in presenting and going on stage and talking to people, because I don't ever know if my demo is going to work or not. At least in the past, I was fairly consistent that what I show it's going to happen. But now it's more about like, oh, let's give it a try and hope for the best. But there we go. Daily Push, your job of creating tic-tac-toe is absolutely safe for this moment. I do encourage you to try a little bit more complex things, because serverless applications are so much more than tic-tac-toe, right? It's so much more complex and you know, impactful stuff. This is just a great example of outlining how lambdas and I'm gonna say there's no DynamoDB here, but lambdas and API gateways work here. So, but it gives you at least the entry point into doing serverless applications. Probably at some future time, there's going to be some event-driven architectures here, or more stuff. So, but yes, next time, definitely, Brian and Sean, I want you to come back on the show and use the power of all your free tokens you have here at AWS to create something a little bit more complicated, let's say, than tic-tac-toe, and then make no mistakes.
Would love to do that. The funny thing about this, here we only built the back end. I have a feeling if we told it to build the front end and back end, it would have worked 100%.
Well, yes. However, I think this is a more realistic example, because sometimes we just deal with stuff that we got. Like you can't then, well, or can you? You can't really go and recreate the front end willy-nilly, right? You have to deal with the things you have to do. So,
very true.
Excellent. Well, friends, thank you so much. I do highly encourage you to go check out Sean and Brian on the social medias. I guess the LinkedIn's, you will find them. And Sean has promised to share his skills files in the future, so you're on the hook right now.
I will do it.
Okay, good. I do wanna check them out as well. Chat. Kenneth, Daily Push, a bunch of folks in the chat. Thank you so much for being part of the show. I do highly appreciate you. Drop in the questions and comments and everything. Join us here next time, and probably going to have two different people here, not me. We'll probably have Julian and Eric talking to you about all things serverless. So with that being said, thank you so much. We'll catch you all next time. Bye.